Hello, everybody. This is Gordon Loeb, and I'm joined by Natalie Loeb. We're going to get started in a few moments with our webinar on how to be a better boss by putting accountability into action, the second of our three-part series. If you can hear me, please just type a message in the chat box so that I know you guys can hear. Also, I just wanted to see if you can see on your screen. It should be just one slide, but let me know if you see two slides. So if you could type anything, if you're hearing me, just type that the sound is okay. And also, if you can see one slide, the Welcome Be a Better Boss Putting Accountability into Action slide, or if you see two slides. Once again, if anyone can hear me, please just let me know. Want to make sure that the sound is going out okay? I'm not seeing that people can hear me, so if anyone can type into their chat box. Okay, it is showing two screens. All right, we're going to try and fix that in a second. I'm going to pause the show screen. No, it's not showing anything. Okay, let me see if I can do this. I don't understand this. Thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate it. So it looks like you can hear me and the sound is good, and we're going to be starting in a few moments. In the meantime, I'm just going to give you a quick slide and just let me know your thoughts on this slide. Oh, slide disappeared. We'll get started shortly. All right, folks, once again, we'll get started very shortly. This is Gordon Loeb, the second in our three-part series on being a better boss, putting accountability into action. And I'm joined by Natalie Loeb. We look forward to spending the hour with you.
So I'm going to log in again.
All right, well, thanks. It's just around 12:30, a little bit after, so we're going to get started. Looks like we have great attendance today. So thank you for all joining us. We are going to be talking about accountability, and we're going to spend the next hour with you going over a number of things related to that topic. Again, this is the second in a three-part series. Our next one is in November, and we hope to get you guys involved in this one. There's a lot of great stuff about accountability, and it's really an important factor in how to be a better boss. So a little bit about us. Some of you might know about us, but some of you might be new to this series. So we're just going to do a very brief recap. Natalie?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Gordon. So hello, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. So my name is Natalie Loeb. We are, and I'm here, as you know, with Gordon Loeb. And we are the owners and the founders of Loeb Leadership Development Group. So a little bit about us. We've been in business for about 20 years. Our focus is on developing leaders at all levels. About 60% of our clients are law firms. About 40% are not law firms. We purposely have a business where we like to spend a lot of time with our legal clients and also get a chance to spend with clients that are outside of the legal world so we can learn best practices from what those folks are doing too and share best practices among industries. Prior to starting the business, I worked for a large law firm myself, for Skadden Arps in New York City for about 10 years. Doing this kind of work. So it's something that I am very passionate about, and now Gordon shares the passion with me. And we get a chance to work with a lot of law firms doing just this, sharing the messages about leadership and management development. We do it through webinars. We do it through workshops in-house at law firms. We do it through open enrollment workshops, and we also happen to do a lot of one-on-one coaching with leaders, both lawyers and people on the professional side. So happy to be here talking about this topic with you today. I would say the word accountability probably comes up in 9 out of 10 of our conversations. Particularly in law firms, we see it seems to be something that leaders tend to struggle with, whether it's either holding themselves accountable or holding others accountable. So, but what we know in order to be an effective manager or leader is that we have to get good at being able to hold both ourselves and each other and our direct reports, of course, accountable. So that's the idea of this webinar, to talk a little bit about it, let you reflect on some of the accountability principles that we're familiar with, that we've seen others either struggle with or have success with, and then so you can pick and choose what works for you.
Thanks. And one of the great points that Natalie just made is we have to keep ourselves accountable as well and really model the way. It's very, very important in the process of accountability.
Right. We always are constantly reminding our leaders that it's as though they're on stage. Their behavior matters. And so in terms of accountability, to the extent that we hold ourselves accountable to, matters, and that we follow through on our own commitments.
So in a recent American Management Association poll, 38% of the respondents said that fear of being held responsible for mistakes or failures was the #1 obstacle for employees to take greater responsibility at work. That's huge. A couple of the other ones that are there are problems already ingrained in the organization's culture, lack of incentives or deterrents in organizational processes, but outstandingly, it's fear of being held responsible for mistakes or failures. And that's something that we can really address in small wins and in larger wins as well. When asked about the steps their organizations could take to resolve that, the top 2 answers were about encouraging risk-taking and including accountability as a criteria in reviews and goal setting. So think about that for a second. Supporting a culture where well-reasoned risk-taking is encouraged. It's very, very challenging in certain industries, especially within law firms. We know that. Things have to get done, and they have to get done accurately, and they have to get done in a very sometimes urgent time frame. Not only sometimes, but many times urgent time frame. So it's hard sometimes to think that you could take some risk or try and think of things and challenge the process. But it's something that if we can instill that into the culture, it can make a big difference. And if you look at the other ones, including accountability as a criterion in performance reviews and goal setting, the other ones align with those top 2. Demonstrating taking responsibility at the most senior level, giving recognition to employees who take responsibility, and providing training in decision-making and problem-solving to build confidence in taking responsibility. It's a very important factor in order to help people feel involved in the process and to take responsibility if they have some role in creating that responsibility. Anything to add to that, Nat?
No, I think you said it pretty well.
Thanks. Here's a definition of accountability. There are lots of different definitions, but take a look at this. The obligation of an individual or organization to account for its activities, accept responsibility for them, and to disclose the results in a transparent manner. And that came straight out of the Business Dictionary. And I think it's pretty spot on. You had another way of phrasing that, Natalie.
Well, I think it's very spot on. What I'd like to add is that when we do a lot of work with team building in law firms and other organizations, there's a discussion around accountability. And the piece that we know that teams need to focus on if they want to be high-performing teams is that they have to be comfortable holding themselves and each other accountable, like I mentioned earlier. And what's interesting about that is that we remind the team that it's not solely the team leader's responsibility to hold everyone else accountable. Sure, the team leader is responsible for holding folks accountable, no doubt. And all of you on the call, I imagine, are team leaders in some way. But when you create an environment where everyone knows that they have to hold each other accountable too, now you're really starting to be able to have accountability permeate through your department or organization. So it's a little tricky. It's people really feeling as though they can step up to the plate and hold themselves accountable, and they can be comfortable holding each other accountable too, which requires that the team leader, again, models their ability to knowing to place accountability as a priority and expect that from the team members too.
Thanks. And if you're looking at the slides, you're seeing my cursor a little bit. We had a little technical issue with the slideshow version of this PowerPoint, so we're doing it this way. Hope it's okay on your end. So take a look at this. Accountability is not the consequence for poor performance or the act of looking for someone to blame. While there's nothing in the definition that talks about blame or punishment or negative outcomes, most people think of accountability as accepting the blame. And that's really not what it's all about. If it's positioned correctly, if it's enforced correctly, if it's reinforced correctly, it shouldn't be about the consequence of poor performance or the act of looking for someone to blame.
In fact, if there's a lot of blame and finger pointing going on, chances are there is not a lot of accountability. People not stepping up and feeling comfortable being accountable. So we noticed that we were at a workshop recently with a group of managers in a law firm, and we started talking about why perhaps there isn't as much of a innovative culture or in their departments as they would like. And there was a whole discussion around people being fearful of trying something new because they would be blamed, and there would be a blame, and there was a blame culture there. And so we started to talk a lot about that. And what that blame culture looks like and what it does to the folks on their team. And eventually it wrapped around to that the blame wasn't effective, and that when a manager was, again, holding themselves accountable at each and holding direct reports accountable, everyone was on the same team wanting to do their best work. The blame was minimal, and the looking and learning of lessons of what happened and what went wrong was more often the case, and in that way people moved forward and made better decisions and improved. So it's not unusual for blame to be in organizations. However, it's a signal that maybe this accountability thing really isn't embraced yet.
And it also goes back to trust too. Maybe there's not a lot of trust on the team or with the people involved, or clear direction or clear expectations. We're going to go through a number of these things in a few moments. One of the things that we introduced in the last workshop and webinar, and some of the other webinars that we do, it's a very important core piece of leadership and management development, and it's called Mindset. And there's a great book by Carol Dweck. Some of you might remember us mentioning that. And it's a great read. Carol Dweck, and the book is called Mindset. She did a lot of research, and she found that there were some people that had a fixed mindset, which she defined as people that feel that they were born with a certain innate amount of intelligence, and they go through life trying to protect that image, and they don't take risks because taking risks might expose that they don't know everything. If something goes wrong, it couldn't be them because they do everything the right way, so they start blaming other people. And there are a lot of other things with a fixed mindset. The growth mindset, which is the other mindset that she found through her research, is, hey, I know I don't know everything. These are people that are willing to learn. If mistakes happen, you know what? I wish it didn't happen, but what can I learn from it? How can I do better next time? How can I be more accountable? So when we're talking about accountability, when we're talking about just about everything with leadership and management development, we hope people look at it from a growth mindset. It's a very important way of doing it. It rephrases a lot of things. It reframes a lot of things. So it's a very important factor. Great book, Carol Dweck, Mindset. So what's the value of organizations that have an accountability culture? If you look at these bullets, increased employee performance, more employee engagement, ongoing professional and organizational development, you guys can read the rest of the bullets, but studies of organizations and high-performing teams and work groups have consistently shown that a culture of accountability yields positive outcomes for individuals and organizations. You know, and the bottom bullet is better business results than competitors. So it's a really, really important concept to have an accountability culture, and we'll see how we can help to get there. Obviously, there is a focus on accountability culture that if you don't have it, what happens? So in that respect, conversely, organizations with a low accountability culture, which is based on many studies, are most organizations. The focus is more on just doing the job. People aren't, that concerned about what the overall results. It's, hey, I did my job. If something went wrong, it's got to be somebody else. And employees are managed and focused on their individual responsibilities and tasks, and they take their cue and guidance from their manager. There's not that much incentive for anyone to break out of this as the rewards and compensation are based on the employee's successful execution of the job description and just the job description. They're not looking for the big picture. When there's a singular management focus on doing the job, the culture is one of shifting blame. CYA, we all know what that means, ignoring or defending mistakes, confusion, etc.
So I'd like you to think about it like this for a second. And here's an example. Let's say you're going into surgery. And let's say there's a team of medical professionals that are in that operating room. And let's say that doctor says, okay, I'll take 50% of accountability for the success of this surgery. And then one of his nurses says, I'll take 30%. And then the anesthesiologist says, I'll take 20%. Would you feel that comfortable going into that surgery? We know that each one of those professionals has 100%, needs to be 100% accountable for the success of that operation. And we want them going in there feeling that way, don't we? So in organizations, as we'll see, with a high accountability culture, everybody really feels 100% committed to the overall success of the firm, the department, the project, the service, the operation, whatever it may be. That individual focus can get in the way.
So see if these sound familiar with an accountability culture that's not very positive. That's not in my job description. It's the IT department's fault. If you told me that was important, that would have made it a higher priority. These all sound familiar to a lot of folks. These are what's really happening out there in a lot of cultures that don't have a good accountability culture. But with the right mindset, we just talked about mindset, things can really change. I'm working with IT to get that report automated. Can we brainstorm on some ways to deliver on both initiatives in this tight time frame? People are working together to get the results and are holding each other accountable. And that's a really, really important factor when you have an accountability culture.
I should have spoken to Robert before the meeting about the numbers instead of blindsiding him. So you can see these kinds of comments are problem solving oriented. The people that take accountability are looking ahead. What might go wrong? How can I fix it? Let's keep going until we get this right. Isn't that what you would want from your medical team if you were going in for some sort of surgery? Just keep that in mind as we walk through this content. People taking 100% accountability for success of the overall project.
Yeah, in organizations with the right accountability mindset, the focus is on complete and total personal ownership with a drive towards getting a collective result, just like you're saying, Natalie.
Exactly. I'll do 100% because I need to. So overall, the firm, the department, this project benefits.
So here are some of the principles. And you can't change the whole culture of your organization overnight. We know that. But you can shift your mindset and that of your team by following the core principles of putting accountability into action. So holding employees accountable means recognizing and rewarding excellent performance and delivering consequences for subpar performance.
This is where right here some managers or leaders get stuck. It's some managers or leaders, it's not their, how do we say this? Maybe it's not part of their regular tool in their toolbox to recognize and reward excellent performance. They expect it, they want it, it often gets done, but they may not take that extra moment to actually demonstrate to others that they appreciate it. That goes back to something I know we've said in previous webinars. One of our favorite thought leaders, Ken Blanchard, find people doing something right every day. Catch them doing something right and let them know. So it's funny how we all know it, common sense, but maybe not always common practice. And then you have the other side of the coin of delivering consequences for subpar performance. If people aren't performing, it's our job as managers to make sure they know and they know what they can do differently. And there may very well, often there are consequences. They need to know what they are and how they impact the team, the department, the overall operation. So these are conversations. These are often, they can be emails occasionally, sure, but we find these are the types of conversations that can happen between individuals and organizations that help to build an accountability culture. But it requires a skill set of comfortable communication, recognizing performance, delivering feedback, sharing consequences.
Feedback is a huge, huge part of this, and we're going to be talking about that shortly. But the second bullet here is, and it's a really important one, success is measured by doing the job and delivering results. It's all about results. If you can hold people accountable, and they are held accountable, and they do it collectively, you're going to get those results. The job is not done if the results have not been achieved.
And when people are feeling 100% accountable, they are going to be committed to the overall results. So it should be happening that way. It's when it's clear that the overall results are more important than somebody's individual agenda. That's what accountability looks like.
Yep. Third bullet, results are clearly defined and resources and support are identified. Clarity is one of the biggest issues for for communication challenges and for not getting the results that you're looking for. The next bullet, failure with accountability, is a learning experience. So it's not just if something didn't work out and you were held accountable and there was a problem, learn from that. It's that growth mindset. And the second to last bullet, go ahead.
Well, along that one is what you saw in one of the statements before. I should have checked with Bob instead of blindsiding him. Mm. So recognizing that didn't go so well, quotes, failure. So next time, that's a learning experience. Next time, I'm going to give Bob a heads up so he's not feeling blindsided at that meeting. We all make mistakes. We all do things that aren't when we're not performing perhaps at our best. And that's going to continue to happen in our lifetime. There's no doubt. No one is perfect. But if we are learning from it, we are learning how to hold ourselves accountable. And that's a beautiful thing. Also, when we do it as managers, we're modeling it for other people.
Second to last bullet, and this is really, really important, a big portion of accountability. Giving, receiving, and encouraging feedback is the foundation of managing accountability. So it's a really important factor, and people that have that growth mindset will be able to give, receive, and encourage feedback in a more open and more effective way. If you have a fixed mindset going into feedback, all you're going to hear are the negative aspects of it. You're not going to hear the growth potential aspects of it. And the last one, lead by example. You got to model the way. If you're trying to hold people accountable, but you are not being accountable yourself or being held accountable yourself or not holding yourself accountable, it can be a real challenge to do that, because people will think that you're not authentic or credible, that you're imposing certain things on them that you're not living up to yourself. So the next slide is looking at the principles another way. Here are some of the actions that you can take, 5 actions.
So a lot of people probably listening to this webinar and saying, wow, it's a lot of information about accountability. And perhaps you're reflecting on, that resonates with me, or, I've seen that in other people. So what can I do? Well, and again, this is an example of giving yourself a chance to experiment and hold yourself accountable. Well, here we tried to give you 5 action steps that you can do that would build your skill, if you will, in holding yourself accountable. And here they are. 1 is to be sure you're setting clear expectations with your team or whoever it is that you're working with, whether it's a colleague, a vendor, even your boss sometimes. But setting clear expectations itself is a skill, but it's certainly something to be mindful of. Are you giving people all the information they need so they can be successful? Are you asking them afterwards, is it clear? Is there anything I'm missing? What else do you need from me? Making sure that expectations are clear is going to be so important in order to model that you're holding others accountable and that you're being accountable yourself. Obviously, a focus on results. Are you making sure you're following up and that results are being achieved? Are you letting others know that you expect the results to be achieved? Are you letting others know you take 100% accountability for the results being achieved? Again, go back to that doctor, that nurse, and that anesthesiologist. Don't you want them all 100% focused on the success of the surgery? Don't you want to make sure that they all are bought in and 100% on board that this patient is going to come out and be better than when they came in? We need to do the same thing. As you can see, provide and encourage feedback. That came up a few times already. A leader's role, you have to be comfortable providing feedback, encouraging the feedback loop, encouraging and seeking feedback, giving feedback. It's just critical if you want to be able to hold others accountable. Shifting from that problem solver to solution facilitator. So that's, again, that links to what Gordon said earlier around that growth mindset. So it's always good to be a problem solver and a fixer. And we know in law firms we're expected to be the fixers. But in a growth mindset, you're also questioning and challenging and questioning others in a way to how can we do this better? What are your thoughts on this? Let me see what you can bring to the table. Wow, I never thought of that. Please tell me what your perspective is, rather than just going in and fixing something all the time. I do find with legal managers and managers in law firms, we tend to take a lot of, I want to say, pride in being the quote go-to person. I'm the problem solver. I'm the problem fixer. Well, sometimes what happens then is you're given all the problems to fix. And that may or may not work for you, but in order to move to the higher level, that leadership level, that leader has to be able to coach and train others also how to fix the problems so that they can be more of a solution facilitator, being able to look at problems in a more broad way, ask questions to the clients, internal clients, and how can we do this better? So that's what good accountability looks like. And then, of course, number 5, which Gordon keeps mentioning, model accountability daily. Model the way. Hold yourself accountable, follow through on your commitments, make sure that people see that they can believe you and trust you, because you're going to hold yourself and everyone on your team accountable. And as you can see at the bottom, accountability is built on feedback. It will be, I will say, impossible to have a culture of accountability if there is no feedback in that culture. It just won't work. You'll get blame instead. No accountability.
And for those that were on the last webinar, we talked about the 4 C's of setting clear expectations. It really starts with clarity, and it starts with you. You have to really consider the context of the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and articulate that clearly to the team members. And then you have to go with the right communication style. People receive information differently. People like to communicate in different ways. If you can kind of match your communication style more effectively with the people around you, it's going to make a big difference. And using the tools to monitor progress and engaging and checking in as often as necessary. And that's a real interesting statement. Engage and check in as often as necessary. We touched on situational leadership in the past as well. And that's a model where you have to figure out what kind of support and direction people need. Some people will need more direction because they're not sure how to do things yet, and you need to be checking in with them more frequently. And some people got it, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they just need some support and resources and just a check-in every now and then. So as a manager and a leader, it's important for you to diagnose how much direction and how much support people need and how to communicate that effectively. The commitment is, once you have the trust with your team, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, seeking the agreement and commitment on a plan of action. And it's the real commitment. And we'll talk about what that looks like versus people just, kind of nodding and saying, yeah, I'm committed. Using a tool to monitor progress and reaffirming the commitment as the needs evolve and change. Just because you have a project and people are committed to it doesn't mean that it's a straight line. So by reaffirming the commitment as the needs change and evolve and communicating that effectively, very important. Consistency, it really is all about consistency as well. The consistent application of setting expectations, it's a habit basically. And if you're consistent, people will know that what to expect. And if you've done the clarity, communication, and the commitment part, and you consistently do it, people will feel more comfortable that what you say is what you mean. So focusing on results, achieving their result. An expansion of setting expectations is making sure the expectations are tied to specific results. And when you focus on results, you elevate a task or a project from a to-do item to an integral part of the business process. So, for example, it's not enough just to create a report. The report needs to be created that accurately reflects the fluctuations on our monthly spending and highlights each manager spend along with the year-to-date projections. So this report needs to be in the hands of the managers before the company meeting on the 15th. Some managers may need more detail than others. You'll need to make sure that what they have, they need to speak to their budget management, that they have what they need to speak to their budget management office. So if the company goal is to stay on the strict budget we established after losing a major client, if we do this well, we're going to pay out a bonus. So that's the example. So sometimes people will think, okay, I did my part, so you can hold me accountable. I did my part. but it's really about that collective result, achieving the result, the organizational focus, how the team and the group, their goals really come true. So the outcomes and the results, not just doing your part of that report. So if the report was produced, but it didn't live up to what it was supposed to do, that's not the result. That is what they were looking for. So you have to self-monitor and always have ongoing development, because again, it's not a straight line. A big part also is rewards and compensation can be based on the exaction of a job towards achievement of results. So by being held accountable in an authentic way, it should lead to the results that you're looking for, not just that I did my job. So doing the job, accountability in action, achieving the result. It's the marriage of doing a job and achieving the result. In the example we just shared, doing the job would be creating a report and emailing it out a week before with a note to reach out if there are any questions in waiting. Being fully accountable, the employee would create the report, review each one to see if anything is alarming or glaring ahead of time, reach out to the managers who have the biggest changes and see if they need any additional support, give a heads up to the manager if there were some issues with the report, and that might come up at the meeting so she can be prepared. And possibility of running additional analysis if it made sense, not just doing your portion of that job. So it really is looking at that big picture, and that's accountability in action. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good example. I mean, it's also reminding me, just this morning, we were on a phone call with about 6 of our facilitators. One person is responsible for the decks and the workbooks that we create. One person was the designer of this program we were reviewing together, and one person was a member of the L&D team, learning and development team, from the client we're working with. And if you were listening in on this call or you were part of it, you would notice that each and every person on that call felt 100% accountable for a successful outcome, meaning a successful launch of this new training program in this organization. Everyone was committed, everyone was contributing, everyone was willing to say, I will take care of that piece and get it to whoever it needed to get to. And at the end of the call, we actually got an email from someone that's newer to the team and said to me, wow, it was really great to hear that and see how you all work together. That's pretty unique. So the point being is that this whole team knows that the expectation is that they're all 100% accountable for a successful launch of this program for this client. And you heard it on the call. You noticed it. You saw everybody doing their job, but knowing the overall result is what mattered. And we're feeling very comfortable along with the client that it will be a successful launch when it launches. That being said, the tone was already set that we're launching. And if anything is not perfect or does not meet the client's expectation, the expectation is the client will let us know so we can fix it. And again, we're holding the client accountable for that. So when it works, it's pretty powerful. It's just that it's an intentional strategic decision for everybody to be accountable and hold themselves and each other there.
So take a look at these points, and these are things to consider when you're focusing on results, and it's very important to communicate these effectively. What does the final result look like? Really paint that picture and make sure it's detailed enough that people can really understand what that looks like. You have to have a completion date. So when should the result be completed? These are part of the SMART goals. We're going to get to that in a second. What metric will be used to measure the performance, and who are the stakeholders? These are things to keep in mind, the questions to keep in mind when you're focusing on results.
So if I were going to use the project that I just mentioned earlier as an example, focus on results. What does the final result look like? Well, it's a very successful delivery of this particular training program to this client. When should the result be completed? November 9th is our launch date, at least for the first milestone. What metric will be used to measure the performance? Well, the metric will be the direct feedback from the office leader in the office where we're delivering it, from the client that was on the phone today, share her feedback, and from the feedback from the people in the room. Was it useful? What did they get out of it? What can they do differently? We'll be asking those questions. Those will be the metrics. And who are the stakeholders? So all the stakeholders here are the client. Ultimately, the client has to be happy with the results. So there is a focus there. And as one of our ways to hold ourselves accountable was to bring the client into the discussion this morning so they could hear what's going on and start providing feedback along the way. And client also knows we expect their feedback after the initial launch. which by the way is a little bit of a tip. If you are delivering some sort of service to a particular client, whether it's internal or external, the earlier on you can bring the client into the fold and seek their feedback, and then we go back to that feedback thing, the better, higher chance for success and the building of trust. So it's always a good idea to ask your client, what do you think? How's this going? Are we hitting the mark? Are we missing the mark?
So feedback, again, it's the foundation. It's the foundation of accountability. And here are some of the actions that it can lead to. And we can't stress this enough. If you foster a culture of giving and receiving feedback in your group, you're going to see accountability flourish. We actually did a webinar for ALA Capital Chapter. There should be a recording available. If not, I'll resend it to Jesse on giving and receiving feedback. So for more information, I'll make sure that we get that out to you if you're interested. And you got to remember that feedback isn't just you giving it to your employees. It's also you asking for it. How can I be more helpful to you? It's you encouraging them to give it to their peers as well. So it allows employees to know where they stand. It really helps to enforce and assess accountability. It's really much more effective when you set the clear expectations, and it's got to be targeted and in time. It's vital for high performers as those that are struggling. So it's effective for both. You need to really have that feedback for people that are high performers. Sometimes people feel, oh, I'll just leave them alone. They know what they're doing. I'm not going to get in their way, but they need feedback as well. And it should be encouraged between the staff and the teams. And it's definitely a two-way street. Anything else to add?
No, I think it's really clear that feedback is required, critical in a culture of accountability.
So if you've set the expectations, defined the results, encouraged feedback, your job really now is to get out of the way and allow the employees, if they make a mistake, allow them to fix them if they can. So how can we get back on track? Who else needs to know about this? If there are mistakes that are made, if you just correct them all the time, the employees are not going to learn, or the other team members are not going to learn. You have to coach them on how to give feedback to their peers and then have them do it. It's a very important factor, because when you have very highly functioning teams that are accountable, they hold themselves accountable, not just the manager or the leader of that team holding people accountable. So if they can give each other feedback and let people know how they're doing, or that somebody isn't going to be able to do something because they need more resources, but they're not telling people because they don't feel that they can trust them, that's going to lead to problems, and that's going to lead to an accountability issue. So if you come from a solution mindset rather than a problem mindset, you can really, really make a difference with that.
Yep.
Okay. Again, sorry for the technical issues with these slides. We're just trying to get through them for this program. We'll figure out what it is on the other end. So problem versus solution. If you're a problem solver, take a look at the left-hand side here. And Natalie, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So a problem solver, you see Jane and you see Jane's manager. And it says, Joe has not given me the report. Okay, so I have to go fix that problem, don't I? Then you see Jane's manager and then Joe's manager. Can you speak with Joe about getting the report to Jane? Okay. And then you see Joe's manager and Joe. Joe, what's happening with getting Jane the report she asked for? Okay, so that solves the problem, doesn't it? Okay, it's one way to look at it. Now let's look at the solution facilitator, Jane and Joe. Joe, when will you be able to give me the report? We agreed you would send it to me this morning, or you would send it this morning. So what we notice is, and some of our clients call this the red line and the blue line, that in cultures that accountability is not so strong, it's not that they don't have talented people there. It's thus that people tend to walk what they call the red line. Instead of going directly to somebody to talk to them directly about something that may not be an issue, like this report not having yet been delivered, they go to the person's manager and say, can you let them know, or can you tell them, or how to, they don't go directly to the person that they need to talk to. So we call that the red line when it's indirect. And that happens often when there are lots of problem solvers. They want to solve a problem. A solution facilitator will walk the blue line. And they can walk the blue line comfortably because in this example, in solution facilitator, both Jane and Joe understand that it's important to give 100% accountability for the overall success. So Jane knows that she can go to Joe and ask, and Joe knows that Joe will take responsibility / accountability and let Jane know what happened. So they don't have to go through all those different conversations. Work happens quicker. People solve problems faster or get to solutions faster. And there is I don't say there's none, but really a lower level of defensiveness and blame. Instead, people are focused on solutions. So that's what you're seeing there. It's not unusual. Again, law firms are filled with problem solvers. We're told to fix things, and we have to go out there and fix them. We just want to get you thinking about, if you want to demonstrate accountability along the way, or promoting accountability along the way, sometimes going directly to a person to have a conversation, which again is consistent with feedback, is the most effective way to grow an accountability culture. And that's what we'd like you to think about here. Which part resonates? Where would you put yourself on this chart? Where are you most often? What would your direct reports and colleagues say about you?
So besides feedback, this is probably the most powerful thing you can do to put accountability into action. You really have to model accountability as a leader. And when you struggle and make mistakes or missteps, you speak to it with your team. You can demonstrate ownership over your results and show them how to do it. So own your commitment to a result, no matter the outcome. If something happened, hey, I made a mistake. I should have spoken to you first. Reflect. What am I doing to contribute to the problem and or success? And then learn from the mistake and successes and make it part of your engagement with your team. Nice little quote, personal choice to rise above one's circumstances and demonstrate the ownership necessary for achieving desired results is the Oz principle. And it really does start with you. It's all about modeling the way, being authentic and credible. If people don't see you holding yourself accountable, it's much harder for them to feel that they should be held accountable by you. Any thoughts? Great. So we're going to talk about a couple tools as we get closer to the wrap up. A couple different things, an action register, which we'll show you in a moment. Lots of different formats of that. The RACI matrix, a lot of it is about goal setting with tools, SMART, GROW, and WHOOP. We'll talk briefly about those. And we'll also talk about the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model. We actually did a webinar on that as well for your chapter quite a while ago. I can make that available as well. And using performance management systems to make performance notes, really tracking things. So this is just an example of an action register, just keeping track of the date, the action item, who owns it, what kind of priority, the due date, percent completed, the status, and I would probably add another column about results and having the employee reflect on the result to get into that practice. Another tool is the RACI model, or matrix, if you will, and it's an acronym for who's responsible, who's going to be doing this task, who's assigned to work on this task, who's also involved in this task, the accountability part, who is ultimately accountable for the project or task being completed appropriately. So that's a really, really important factor. It's the clarity and the communication again. Who's responsible to the person and who is accountable to this person. Consulted. People are not directly involved with carrying out the task, but who are consulted. So it's very important to know who the stakeholders are or who the subject matter experts that might need to be brought into this project are. And informed. Those who receive output from the task or need to be informed and updated. So these are the matrix, the RACI matrix that can help people stay on track and be held accountable. Setting goals, we're all pretty familiar with the SMART goals. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. It's a really great tool for goal setting. And once you have that goal and you can get that true commitment, you're going to have the ability to have accountability from your folks and get those results. The GROW model is a great coaching model. Again, we talked about this in our first of this series. What's the goal? What's the reality? How are we close to that goal? Are we really far off? What are the options that we need to use to get to that goal? And also, what's the will? What's the way forward? And do we have the motivation to get there? The WHOOP is wish. What's the wish? Kind of like what's the goal? What's the outcome? What are the obstacles in between? And what's the plan? So these are just different ways of setting goals, whatever's more comfortable for you. WHOOP is also very good for anticipating challenges because you're really looking at the obstacles that might get in the way. And this is a really a great model that we use in a lot of our workshops. It's based on the book by Patrick Lencioni called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This is a model called The 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team. And what this model really shows, we might have touched on it in our first session too, but again, if you want the webinar recording, I'll send that to Jesse again. It's really based on a foundation of trust. There are 5 different behaviors that if you do these more effectively, you will have a much more cohesive team and be able to hold people accountable. And everyone on your team will be able to hold each other accountable. But it really starts with trust. It's the foundation of this pyramid. It's very hard to get to conflict, commitment, accountability, and results if you don't have trust. And what he's talking about is vulnerability-based trust, not just predictive trust. So if someone shows up to work every morning at 9 a.m., I can trust that the next day they're going to show up at 9 a.m. because they've been doing that for 9 years. But it's really about vulnerability-based trust, the ability to trust people on your team or your manager or your employees that report to you or that you report to, that you're able to tell them what's really going on. If you were given a task and you thought you could get it done, but something comes up and you don't feel that you have that vulnerability-based trust where you can tell what's really happening, it's just not going to get done, and there's going to be a challenge. So if you have the culture that you can set, and it's very important for you to set it as a manager and a leader, where people feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm in over my head, I need some more support. I thought I could do this, but it's not working out. Once you have that ability to have that vulnerability-based trust, you're more likely to get real communication. Once you have that vulnerability-based trust, conflict takes on a different mindset, if you will, and we'll go back to that growth mindset. So some people believe that conflict is something they want to avoid, like anything out there. They just want to get away from it. So if you think of a conflict continuum, if I would hold my left hand out all the way to my left and my right hand out all the way to my right, if I look to my left hand, that's something we call artificial harmony. That's where people don't really want to have conflict and will just nod their head, yeah, I'm on board. Yeah, I'm on board. But they really aren't. And then if you look all the way out to my right hand, that's what we call destructive conflict, where people are ready to come to blows and they're just screaming and yelling and it's just getting really intense and nothing's getting accomplished because their blood pressure is rising and there's just no strategy that can be happening in that moment in time. Where you really want to be is somewhere in between, where it's not artificial harmony and it's not destructive conflict. So when it's artificial harmony, it's that way sometimes because people don't feel that trust yet. They don't feel that vulnerability-based trust, and they're just, they don't want to get involved. But once they have that trust, they're more likely to engage in productive conflict, to move from all the way to the left, a little bit closer to the middle, and then a little closer to the middle. And if it goes too far to the right, which is destructive, you can pull it back as the manager or leader. But you want to be somewhere in between. So having that trust is really important. And once you have that authentic conflict, you can really have commitment, because once people, air their views and air their opinions on, all right, this is what I see in this project. I don't agree with you. That's where that conflict continuum comes in, and they push the needle a little bit. Once they've gotten their views out, somebody has to make a decision, where the manager or the leader, once they do, they'll more likely commit to the process because they got their views out in the conflict round. So you're going to have much truer commitment. So sometimes people commit and they don't really commit, and you'll find that those are the people that, again, will say they're going to do it, but something happens, or they miss the deadline. They sabotage things that are going on. So once you have that true commitment, you can have the ability to hold people accountable because they've gone through the other parts of this pyramid. They had the vulnerability-based trust. They were able to get their views out in the conflict. They truly committed to moving forward, and whatever, even if it didn't go their way, they're on board. Once it's true commitment and there's a clear plan of action, they're going to be more willing to hold not only themselves accountable, but one another accountable. So it's very important to have the foundation of this pyramid, and that accountability piece will lead to results. Because once you have true accountability, and people will, readjust if there's an issue, or, I'm in over my head, or I need some more help in order to meet this deadline, you're going to get the results that you're looking for. So it's a great model. It's also a great book. If you want to get another book, we talked about Carol Dweck's Mindset. We're also talking about The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. an excellent read. It's a novel or a fable, and it really outlines, how to have a cohesive team and how to be able to hold people accountable. Anything to add?
No, I think you did a great job. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to be wrapping up shortly. So in putting it all together, here are some of the things that, people reflect on. I'm going to commit to some of these things. Am I going to commit to setting clear expectations with my team, becoming more results focused in setting expectations, fostering a feedback mindset as part of our daily interactions, breaking that manager dependency, encouraging people to handle mistakes and manage results. That was that chart that Natalie talked about with the blue line, red line. Leading by example by asking for feedback and admitting mistakes or missteps. Really, really an important part of this whole process. Using a new tool or exploring a new tool to help monitor. There's some great tools out there for monitoring people and holding people accountable and tracking performance. So, the ones we showed you were just a couple brief ones, but there are a lot of great tools that people feel very comfortable with out there. But holding people accountable really starts with yourself and having that growth mindset and being able to authentically have trust with your team and with yourself by setting the example so that they can, have that true authentic conflict, the commitment, the accountability, and the results. Now that we have a few more minutes, do you have any thoughts or any examples to talk about?
In terms of accountability.
Yeah.
And why don't we answer some questions?
If anyone has a couple questions, we have a few more moments left. You can write in the chat box any questions that you might have. This webinar is going to be recorded. It is being recorded. We will send that out to Jesse. We're also going to have our next webinar, so that on tracking performance on November 15th. And again, if you have any questions, we wrapped up a little bit earlier today to give you some time to either prompt us with questions or to go back to your work lives. So if you have any questions, just type them into the question or the chat box. Thanks again for attending. Oh, let's see what we got here. Here is one. If trust with the leader manager has been broken, what steps can be taken to repair that? That's a great, great question.
That's one of my favorite questions. And we have to do a webinar on that.
Yeah.
On how to rebuild trust. So I want you to think about this first. And we ask this question to leaders all the time. Can you rebuild trust? Okay. And so that's the first question. There are some people that have a school of thought that once it's broken, you can't rebuild it. We have a different mindset. That's more of, I think, a fixed mindset. We have more of a growth mindset that, yes, you can rebuild trust. It takes holding yourself accountable, and I'll tell you how. It takes being able to have a candid, courageous conversation with that manager about why either you've lost some trust or asking if they've lost some trust in you and why. That requires a little bit of vulnerability too, as Gordon was starting to talk about with the trust on the pyramid. So if trust has been broken, it will require this kind of conversation in order for it. That's the first step to rebuild. Once after that conversation, usually there'll be some agreement on what to do moving forward, which is the solution facilitation. And at that point, it is so important for each person to hold themselves accountable for doing what they agreed to. And it takes some time. It really does take some time. And depending on the extent to which the trust being broken has impacted the relationship or the people, it may take more time, or it may take a longer conversation. So it's a great question. So if you're asking me what that first step is, it would be thinking about how I'm going to open a conversation with the person where the trust is broken and what that's going to sound like. Yeah. Stephen Covey wrote a great book called The Speed of Trust. You might want to look that one up too. Trust is the foundation, as Gordon mentioned, of creating cultures that are collaborative, that are accountable, and honestly more fun to be in. So I think it's a great question. I highly encourage you to rebuild trust when it's broken, because otherwise it can be very difficult to continue to work there for yourself. at your maximum potential.
Yeah, and what Natalie, alluded to also, sometimes when there is a trust issue, you're not going to get to, the conflict, commitment, accountability, and results in the Lencioni model, but you're also going to get some potential backstabbing and sabotaging, and quite a few other things. So rebuilding it is very important. It is tough, as Natalie outlined, but there are some ways of doing it. I just want to thank everybody also for, you guys did respond to me when I was asking earlier about the sound. It went into a different section of the question and chat box, so I see all your responses, so appreciate that. We've been using this platform, and for some reason it was acting a little bit buggy today, but it's usually perfect, so really appreciate your patience with that. Any last questions? If we're just going to scroll down, if anyone has any last questions or any last thoughts. We have about 2 minutes left. All right, we're getting some nice responses. Some people wish this was a little longer. But again, really appreciate your guys' feedback. And I will send the recording of this webinar to Jessie in the next few days, and she will be able to send you the link for it. So thanks a lot for being part of this, and we'll see you on November 15th.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, folks.